Hi, this is Abby from Witchcraft Criminal History. How are you doing today? Hopefully you're doing well and you're enjoying this Jack the Ripper series. This is part 6. Okay, so this video is going to be about the possible victims. So these are women who were murdered, but they're not sure whether they are Ripper victims. Okay, let's get into it. Alright, you have Fairy Fay. She was murdered on the 26th of December 1887. Followed up by Annie Millward. She was murdered on the 25th of February 1888. Then you got Ada Wilson, who was murdered on the 28th of March 1888. And then you got Emma Smith. She was murdered on the 3rd of April 1888. Then you got Martha Tabram. We mentioned about this victim in the first video. You got Martha Tabram. She was murdered on the 7th of August 1888. Then you got the Whitechapel mystery. And this unidentified woman was murdered on the 3rd of October 1888. Then you got Annie Farmer. She was murdered on the 20th of November 1888. Then you got Rose Millett. She was murdered on the 20th of December 1888. Then you got Elizabeth Jackson. She was murdered in June 1889. They're followed up by Alice Mackenzie. She was murdered on the 17th of July 1889. And now we've got another unknown murder. This is known as a Pinchin Street murder. This unidentified lady was murdered on the 10th of September 1889. Then you've got Frances Coles. She was murdered on the 13th of February 1891. And then you got the last one, who supposedly was a murder victim, and that was Carrie Brown, who was murdered on the 24th of April 1891. Well, let's go a little bit into them, shall we? Alright, with Fairy Fay. Fairy Fay is a bit of a mystery victim, because they're not quite sure if this person actually existed. Because there is no records of this particular murder case. There is no records. Fair enough, it was in the 1800s, but there were no records. None. So there wasn't any records of Fairy Fay. With Annie Millward. Annie Millward was found, like Annie Millward was 38 years old when she was murdered. She had stab wounds in her legs and lower part of her body. And she apparently died in the hospital. And she claimed that she was attacked by a man. They don't know, who it was. All they know that it was, in her own words, she said it was a stranger. She did not know who her assailant was. And that was Annie Millward. The next victim. The next possible victim of Jack the Ripper was Ada Wilson. Ada Wilson was assaulted in her home because somebody was knocking on her door and they demanded money. But when she refused to give them money, she was stabbed and left for dead. And subsequently she died from her injuries. And the next victim was Emma Elizabeth Smith. Emma Elizabeth Smith, she was believed to be one of the victims, and she said that she was attacked by people, so this was more than one person. They apparently beat her, raped her, then they visually jabbed an object into her vagina, which has caused a tear in her perineum. And they pretty much left her dead on the streets. So after being, raped and having that type of injury, she also subsequently, died from her injuries. The next known victim was Martha Tabram. Martha Tabram was also found, stabbed. And she actually was able to get to help. And according to her, she was attacked by a couple of men. But once again, there's a possibility that Martha Tabram was also one of the Ripper murders. Then you got the Whitehall mystery. And this was when a headless and limbless torso of a woman was found dumped in a vault. And seen in a cellar of the New Scotland Yard. So how that happened, I'm not quite sure. And the rest of her body was dumped in the Thames. So they don't know what exactly, happened to her. The next victim. Then you got Annie Farmer, and she actually survived. But they lost suspicions. They don't know whether she actually was a victim or she was just trying to get back at a disgruntled client, because she only had a minor cut to the neck. Very, very minor. And her last customer apparently ran out the doll's house screaming, "What a cow." So we're not quite sure whether, she was making it up. So that was another possible Ripper victim. The next victim was Rose Millett. She was, her body was found about 2 miles away from the centre of Whitechapel. But they're not quite sure whether she is a victim because she had no penetrating wounds. So her neck wasn't cut, neither was she eviscerated, and there was no cause of death. So that's Rosa Millett, the next victim. Then you got Elizabeth Jackson. Her body was found in the Thames, however, I wasn't able to find any more information about this particular victim. So the next possible victim is Alice Mackenzie. She was from Ireland and was living in Whitechapel. The cause of her death was from a from a laceration of her left cardio artery. She had two stab wounds in the left side of her neck, carried forward in the same skin wound, some bruising on the chest, 5 bruises on the left side of her abdomen. Cuts were made from left to right, apparently while Mackenzie was on the ground. A long 7-inch, but not unduly deep, wound from the bottom of the left breast to the navel. So it'd be like there, down to your belly button. And 7 or 8 scratches beginning at the navel and pointing towards the genitalia. So that's from your belly button down to your private area. A small cross across the Mons Veneris. I'm not quite sure what that is. So that will happen with her. And the next victim The Pigeon Street murder, they're not quite sure who it was, but they suspect it could have been Lydia Hart. And the reason why they couldn't really find out who she was because she was found dumped near railway lines in a sack. She was missing her arms and her head, so she had no head. This is another possible victim of Jack the Ripper. And the next possible victim. Then you got Frances Coles. And they don't know whether she was a Ripper victim, even though her neck was slashed. And the main reason for that was it was done by a dull knife. As with Jack the Ripper, it always had sharp knives. So they're not quite sure whether she was a Ripper victim. And the next possible Ripper victim is another possible victim of Jack the Ripper. This one's actually in New York. And that is Carrie Brown. Carrie Brown was mutilated in a hotel room in New York. She had X's carved into her body and onto her face, and pretty much she had the same type of injuries as the Whitechapel murders. So this video is on the possible victims of Jack the Ripper, both in England and the US. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and join me for part 6. If you like it, like and subscribe. Have a great day, and blessed be.